You're fasting, you're drinking black coffee, you're doing everything the internet told you to do, and the fat is still not moving. Here's what nobody tells you. It's not the coffee that's hurting you, it's when you're drinking it. There is a specific window, backed by peer-reviewed research, where coffee amplifies fat oxidation, sharpens your metabolism, and works with your fasted state instead of quietly killing it. Miss that window, and you could be spiking cortisol, blunting fat-burning enzymes, and wasting every hour of your fast without even knowing it. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly when to drink your coffee, why the timing matters at a biological level, and the most common mistakes people make that silently wreck their fasting results. Stay with me, because what's coming up at the end of this video will completely change the way you approach your mornings. Let's get one thing straight before we dive in. This video is not about demonizing coffee. Coffee, when used correctly during a fast, is one of the most powerful metabolic tools you have access to. Caffeine is one of the most studied ergogenic compounds on the planet. Fat loss, mental performance, endurance. The research is deep and it's consistent. But drink coffee while fasting is incomplete advice. It's like telling someone to exercise to lose weight, without telling them what kind, how much, or when. The when is everything. By the end of this video, you will understand what coffee actually does to your body during a fast, the specific timing windows, morning cortisol, the fat-burning sweet spot, and the danger zone, the mistakes that are quietly keeping you stuck, and a simple, practical protocol you can start using tomorrow. No fluff, no fake promises. Let's go. When you drink black coffee, no sugar, no cream, no flavored syrups, the caloric impact is essentially zero. Around 2 to 5 calories per cup. That's not enough to break a fast in the metabolic sense. But what coffee does do is pharmacologically significant. Caffeine's primary mechanism is adenosine receptor antagonism. Adenosine is the neurotransmitter that builds up throughout the day and makes you feel sleepy. Caffeine blocks those receptors, which is why you feel alert. But that's just the surface effect. At a deeper level, caffeine triggers the release of catecholamines, primarily epinephrine, also called adrenaline. Epinephrine signals your fat cells to release stored fatty acids into the bloodstream through a process called lipolysis. Once those fatty acids are released, your body can use them as fuel, which is exactly what you want when you're fasting. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that caffeine increases fat oxidation by approximately 11% in lean individuals and up to 29% in obese individuals over a 3-hour period. That is not a trivial effect. Coffee also increases your basal metabolic rate, BMR, meaning you burn more calories at rest. Studies show caffeine can raise metabolic rate by 3 to 11%, depending on dosage and individual sensitivity. And here's the one that most people overlook. Coffee enhances AMPK activation. AMP-activated protein kinase. AMPK is essentially your body's energy-sensing enzyme. When activated, it promotes fat burning and actually mimics some of the metabolic effects of caloric restriction. This is part of why coffee and fasting work so well together. They're activating overlapping metabolic pathways. So yes, coffee can be your best fasting ally, but only if you time it right. This is where most people get it wrong, and it's the most important piece of the entire video. When you wake up, your body has already started its own internal stimulant system. Your cortisol levels naturally peak within 30 to 45 minutes of waking, a phenomenon called the Cortisol Awakening Response, or CAR. This is your body's biological alarm clock. Cortisol isn't inherently bad. It's what wakes you up, sharpens your focus, mobilizes energy, and gets you ready to function. Here's the problem. When you drink coffee the moment you wake up, you are adding external caffeine stimulation on top of an already elevated cortisol peak. Research from endocrinologist Dr. Andrew Huberman and the broader neuroendocrinology literature indicates that doing this has 2 major consequences. First, you blunt your body's natural cortisol production. Over time, your brain registers that it doesn't need to produce as much cortisol on its own, because external caffeine is doing the job. The result? You become more dependent on coffee to feel awake. Your natural energy regulation gets disrupted, and you often experience an energy crash mid-morning when both the cortisol and the caffeine wear off simultaneously. Second, you amplify cortisol beyond its optimal range. Caffeine itself raises cortisol. Stack that on top of the morning cortisol spike, and you're looking at chronically elevated stress hormones, which directly promotes fat storage, particularly visceral abdominal fat. This is well documented. Cortisol activates lipoprotein lipase in the belly region, essentially telling your body to store fat there. If you're fasting to lose weight and drinking coffee at 6 a.m. on an empty stomach, you may be working directly against yourself. There's also the ghrelin connection. Ghrelin is your primary hunger hormone. Cortisol elevates ghrelin, which is why a lot of people who drink coffee immediately after waking report feeling hungry faster, sometimes even ravenous, and then breaking their fast earlier than intended. So that coffee kills hunger idea, it's partially correct, but if your cortisol is already spiked, caffeine may actually compound hunger rather than suppress it. The takeaway: do not drink coffee in the first 30 to 90 minutes after waking. Let your cortisol peak naturally, let it begin its natural decline, and then introduce caffeine. So when should you drink your coffee? Based on the cortisol research, the literature on caffeine pharmacokinetics, and what we know about fat oxidation during fasting, the optimal window is 90 minutes to 2 hours after waking. By this point, your cortisol awakening response has peaked and is descending. Introducing caffeine now does several things. 1. Caffeine extends the alertness and energy benefit by blocking adenosine accumulation as cortisol falls. Instead of experiencing an energy crash, you create a smooth secondary wave of focus and mental clarity. 2. Your body has been fasted overnight and has already begun tapping into fat stores. Caffeine at this stage accelerates that fat oxidation without the cortisol stacking problem. You're adding fuel to an already burning metabolic fire, not trying to force ignition before the system is ready. 3. Insulin sensitivity is at one of its highest points. During a fast, insulin drops significantly. Low insulin means your fat cells are far more responsive to lipolytic signals, meaning the epinephrine surge from caffeine is more effective at pulling fatty acids out of storage. You're essentially in a hormonally optimal environment for fat mobilization. There's also a fasting-specific consideration. The longer you've been fasted before drinking your coffee, the greater the fat oxidation effect. A study published in the British Journal of Nutrition found that consuming caffeine before exercise after an overnight fast increased fat burning by 11%, more than the same caffeine dose consumed after breakfast. The fasted state amplifies what the coffee is doing. So if you wake up at 7 a.m., your ideal coffee window is 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Still well within your fasting window if you're doing 16 to 8, 18 to 6, or any standard intermittent fasting protocol. And if you train fasted, the data is even more compelling. Research from the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition shows that caffeine consumed 30 to 60 minutes before fasted exercise significantly increases fat oxidation during the workout, performance output, and post-exercise caloric burn. If you work out at 9 a.m., drink your coffee at 8 to 8:30 a.m. after that initial cortisol window has passed. Real quick, if this is already changing the way you think about coffee and fasting, hit that like button right now and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be breaking down more of these fasting optimization topics, hormones, meal timing, what actually breaks a fast, and more, and you don't want to miss those. Smash the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so YouTube actually shows you the next one. Alright, back to it. Let's talk about the mistakes. Mistake 1. Adding things that break your fast. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. The moment you add the following to your coffee, you are introducing a metabolic response that can disrupt your fast. Sugar immediately spikes insulin. Fast is over. Milk or cream, even a splash. Dairy contains calories, protein, and lactose. Small amounts may not fully break a fast depending on your definition, but they do stimulate insulin and IGF-1 responses that reduce the fat-burning benefit. Oat milk, one of the worst, high in carbohydrates, definitely breaks a fast. Artificial sweeteners, the jury is still debated here, but several studies suggest that sweet taste alone, regardless of calories, can trigger a cephalic phase insulin response. If you're optimizing, go black. Stick to black coffee. That is the only version of coffee that is definitively, scientifically compatible with a fasted metabolic state. Mistake 2. Drinking too much. The cortisol overload. More coffee does not mean more fat burning. Caffeine follows a dose-response curve that plateaus and then reverses. Research suggests that the performance and metabolic benefits of caffeine peak at approximately 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. For a 75-kilogram person, that's roughly 225 to 450 milligrams of caffeine, about 2 to 4 cups of standard drip coffee. Beyond that threshold, you're not increasing fat oxidation. You're increasing cortisol, anxiety, heart rate, and ironically, increasing the likelihood of muscle catabolism. Because when cortisol stays chronically elevated, it starts breaking down lean muscle tissue for energy. That is the opposite of what any serious fasting protocol should be achieving. People who drink 5, 6, 7 cups of coffee a day while fasting and wonder why they feel wired but not lean. This is the answer. 2 to 3 cups, timed correctly, is the sweet spot for most people. Mistake 3. Drinking coffee too late, the sleep disruption loop. This one indirectly destroys fat loss more than most people realize. Caffeine has a half-life of approximately 5 to 7 hours in the average adult. That means if you drink a cup at 2 p.m., half of that caffeine is still active in your system at 7 to 9 p.m. For slow caffeine metabolizers, a genetic variation affecting the CYP1A2 enzyme, that half-life can stretch to 9 to 10 hours. Poor sleep is one of the most powerful drivers of fat gain and metabolic dysfunction. A landmark study from the Annals of Internal Medicine found that sleep-deprived individuals lost 55% less fat over a diet period compared to well-rested individuals on the same caloric intake, and lost significantly more muscle instead. Poor sleep elevates ghrelin, suppresses leptin, your satiety hormone, increases cortisol, reduces insulin sensitivity, and impairs growth hormone secretion, which is one of the primary hormones responsible for overnight fat burning and muscle preservation. Cut your coffee off by noon. If your schedule requires an afternoon cup, 1 p.m. is the absolute latest for most people. If you're a slow metabolizer, even earlier. Mistake 4. Drinking coffee on a completely empty stomach without adaptation. For some people, particularly those new to fasting, drinking coffee on an empty stomach triggers elevated stomach acid, nausea, anxiety, and heart palpitations. This is a real physiological response, not weakness. Caffeine stimulates gastric acid secretion. Without food to buffer it, this can irritate the stomach lining and trigger gastrointestinal discomfort. It also amplifies the adrenaline response, which in some people can produce anxiety and jitteriness that actually increases hunger. If this is you, there are 2 practical solutions. 1. Drink your coffee slightly later in your fast, when you've been awake longer and your system has had more time to stabilize. 2. Try cold brew, which has significantly lower acidity than hot brewed coffee due to the extraction method. Same caffeine, far gentler on the gut. Mistake 5. Using coffee as a substitute for actual fasting strategy. This is the mindset trap. Coffee doesn't make fasting work. Fasting makes fasting work. The caloric deficit, the hormonal shifts, the reduction in insulin, the increase in glucagon and growth hormone. These are produced by the absence of food, not by the presence of caffeine. Coffee is a tool that amplifies what fasting is already doing. If you're fasting only 12 hours, eating in a caloric surplus during your eating window, and sleeping poorly, coffee at the right time will not save your results. The fundamentals still apply. If you're fasting for autophagy, your body's cellular recycling and repair mechanism, coffee actually has something interesting to offer here too. A 2014 study published in Cell Cycle by researchers at the Buck Institute found that coffee consumption, even decaffeinated coffee, triggered autophagy in mice across multiple organ systems, including liver, muscle, and heart tissue. The researchers concluded that compounds in coffee beyond caffeine, specifically polyphenols like chlorogenic acid, appear to activate autophagic pathways. What this suggests is that black coffee may actually support, rather than disrupt, the autophagic benefits of fasting. The key, again, is black. No additives, no calories, nothing that would spike mTOR, the primary inhibitor of autophagy. Green tea is worth a mention here too. EGCG, the primary catechin in green tea, is an even more potent AMPK activator and autophagy inducer than caffeine. Some people who are sensitive to caffeine use green tea as their primary fasting beverage with excellent results. It's not the subject of this video, but it deserves acknowledgement. Let's bring it home. Coffee is not the enemy of your fast. Bad timing is. The science is clear. Drink coffee in the first 30 minutes after waking and you're stacking cortisol on cortisol, promoting fat storage, disrupting hunger hormones, and building caffeine dependency. Wait 90 minutes to 2 hours, drink it black, and you're working with one of the most well-researched metabolic amplifiers available, one that costs less than $2 a cup. There are no magic shortcuts here. No supplement is going to replace a consistent caloric deficit, quality sleep, and a well-structured fasting protocol. But within that structure, coffee, timed correctly, is one of the few legal, accessible, and genuinely effective tools you have to accelerate fat oxidation. That's the real answer. Not a viral hack, not a biohack, just physiology applied correctly. If this video gave you something useful, something you're going to actually use tomorrow morning, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this information. Subscribe if you want to go deeper on fasting, metabolism, and evidence-based strategies that actually move the needle. I'm building a library of content that respects your intelligence. No brochures, no fear-mongering, just research translated into practical action. I'll see you in the next one.